What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. The CDL season is kicking off today, and I figured, I'd tweet out yesterday and get some answers and do our final preseason Q&A. So let's dive in. I'm going to rapid fire through a bunch of excellent questions submitted to me through Twitter. Let's take a look. All right, first up, we got the caster, the GOAT Visions, coming in with a question. Is there anyone in Challengers you think that is being super overlooked? It's a good question. I don't know if there's anyone in like North America at the moment that I think is being kind of slept on, at least in conversations I've seen on Reddit and like on Twitter. I think if there's one player in particular in Europe that I've been guessing for a minute that I think hasn't gotten a lot of love this season is Brezzy. I think Brezzy can slay at a CDL level. And a lot of his ex-teammates always have like good, real quality things to say about him as a teammate. So I've always wondered kind of what the barrier is to him getting on a CDL team beyond maybe say like a work permit sort of process issue. But I think he'd be the one that I would say at the moment that I think is being overlooked. I think on the Challengers front though, we're gonna see a lot of movement on sort of players stock rising over the next few weeks as we get towards the major and we see who does well at land there. Next up, we got Jose coming in. He asks, with Hex absolutely blasting the CDL and Scump retiring, could you realistically see OpTic stepping away? Could I see OpTic selling their spot? I don't think they're going to do that at the moment. What I could see is what OpTic has done in the past, where they sort of soften their like call to action on Twitter and on YouTube in terms of like promoting the CDL and the live stream and all of that. They've done that in the past when there's been sort of disagreements on the back end. So I'll be curious to see if they do it again, but I don't see them like selling their spot anytime soon, nor do I think they would get the value they want in return, at least in this sort of market condition. We got a couple of questions about GAs during this video. So here is the first one up from Dev. What do you think about this to handle GAs? All 4 players agree to GA something, then they deliver the answer to their coach as a team rep. And if all 12 coaches agree, that gets GA without a full 12 coach vote. The question thing stays in the game. Thoughts? Well, the problem for me with the coach stuff is the coach is going to do what the players want. And it's basically the same process that we have now. You're just having the coaches be the mouthpiece and not a representative from each team. The coaches are definitely going to always defend their team. They're always going to be biased towards ensuring quality performance, because more so than players, to an extent, I think coaches sometimes are accountable to the success of the team in sort of like a short-term and long-term form. So I don't know if this would necessarily work. It doesn't really like solve the issue. It just kicks it to the coaches to work through the politics and not the players, and not really like solving what I think is a core issue with it. We got Trey here asking, I watch you on the flank and you have some good ideas to improve the league in certain processes. If you had to choose one to pitch your Activision personally, which one would you choose and how would you pitch it? That's a great question. I think for me, it's the competition committee issue. And I think for me, that's a, I'd probably talk to Daniel personally about it and see if Daniel's sort of open to it, and then, pitch it down as some of the sort of competitive operations team below him and sort of put together a deck. Like, that's how I would do it, obviously with the first step of really making sure Daniel's like down for it before I start going on an exercise of getting the rest of his team to sign on. Interesting one from Sackman. What teams do you think will benefit from an M4 GA and what teams do you think would get harmed? In terms of benefit, I think anyone that's got really 2 solid subs may benefit, because then we probably move away from the 3 AR meta. What teams would get harmed? I don't know if anyone would necessarily off the bat like get harmed. If you look at sort of the weaker teams in the league, like they have more systemic issues than like whether or not they're running like an M4. I can see teams where the ARs and subs are sort of have maybe sort of a difference in pacing, and maybe that gets exacerbated by moving to more of a Scar meta, but I don't know. This is all hypothetical. I don't really know if anyone gets super harmed. I don't know if necessarily there's major benefits. I think the bigger issue for me is that the gun is broken and it needs to go. We got Cross with a question I've seen a couple of times in my chat over the last few weeks. If OpTic come out and play horrible for Major 1, what do you think they'll do? Stick it out for another major or make a major change for a win now team? I think it really depends on the context of how they play bad. Like if they get top 6 and they lost like some tough round 11s and it just was what it was, then I don't know if you really need to make a change. Sometimes it's just not your weekend. But if they got to a tournament and just didn't play well and there was clearly a systemic issue and it required a roster change, I think they would definitely consider it after Major 1. You get enough of a sort of like a time break to get some practice in before Major 2 and make sure you don't slip behind. So I could see it, but again, it depends on the circumstances of how it would go down. All right, we got Frenzy asking, out of all the bottom 4 teams from last year, who do you think has the best chance of having a breakout season? I mean, I think clearly like there's one, I think, answer to this. People may think, oh, a lot of Vegas Legion, they've looked good in scrims. I personally don't think that the Vegas thing is sort of gonna ramp down a bit. Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic about that situation. To me, it's Minnesota. Like they finished 11th last year, surprisingly. Like if you go look at the standings, and I think they're destined for a better season this year. So I think to me that's sort of my obvious answer, but I'm really curious in the comments what you guys think in general. If you think maybe like LAG is a shot, or Florida is a shot, or Vegas is a shot, and I'm kind of off the boat. I think Minnesota for me though is probably the one I would pick. Newfie comes in asking, let's get spicy. Which team in the top 4 to 6 range on paper do you expect to be the biggest letdown? I think Toronto. I think, you know, if we look at the coaches poll, like top 8's pretty tight. So I'm going to kind of expand it to that because it's just sort of hard to say like top 6, top 8 right now. I think Boston to me though, of the sort of Toronto, Minnesota kind of group, like I think Boston's the one team that maybe won't improve as much as we think. And that might then be sort of the biggest letdown because they're sort of in the same box as they were last year, right? They're really good against most teams, all 500, above 500 record, but the minute they played a better squad, like they crumbled. I can see them just still not improving in that area. So I think Boston would be my answer. Mike asks, what org do you think is going to have the best fan experience at their major? This is an interesting question, right? You know, I'm going to maybe give this one a lot of Boston answers, but I might give this one to Boston because I'm very curious what the experience will be like in regards to sort of the event and being at Fenway. I think that could be a really cool experience. The OpTic one will be cool. I mean, ESA's got a pretty good exhibition space when you walk in, and the environment's like pretty good in that room. It's pretty loud. Obviously, if New York's back at King's Theater, the environment there will be really good. It was loud also as well. And Toronto was nice. I like the experience at Toronto. I think the only limiter on Toronto is how high that ceiling is. So the room is not as loud, but they had it set up in a really cool way, and I thought it was a really good fan experience. But for me, you know, because a lot of those were already events that we saw last year, I'm going to pick Boston because I'm pretty excited for this event, to be honest. Jack Walker comes in with a question about FaZe. If FaZe have another subpar season, what do you think that would do to the trio potentially? So we're saying subpar is probably like last year where they don't win an event, I guess would be the parameters of this question. I don't know, man. Like I think at that point they may make sort of more sort of changes and maybe one of the 3 sort of goes. Because at that point you would have gone 2 years without a title and probably a lot of like really tough grand finals losses. I think we have to depend on the circumstances and how people are playing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's possible they might make some pretty bigger changes than others, just, you know, rotating out for Slasher. ECAF has a question about the whole Misfits situation. With orgs like Misfits restructuring away from esports and Legion's owners being known for their tight with their money, to put it nicely, do you think the CDL would have trouble finding new investors if the teams decide to sell their spots? So a couple of things here. One is, in general, market conditions right now, I think to buy an esports franchise is not, I think, at its highest. So trying to sell a team right now is probably not your best market to really maximize your value in return. The problem right now with teams like Misfits and Legion is, I think to the Legion note, like I think that was always, or it seems like it was always, a long-term play to flip the franchise and like spend at least the amount of money as possible. I think the Misfits org situation is like a multi-year thing that's kind of interesting because, you know, of all the stuff they were doing prior to CDL, the CSGO team that didn't work, they've had a number of like really weird esports ventures that they've kind of exited out of. So I think their issues are way more like systemic to how their business model works, and they want to be more of like a content network now, more of an influencer network. It's a hard market because you look at teams like OpTic and FaZe and Thieves, and they can do both purely because of the brand power and the opportunities and the sponsors they have. So yeah, I mean, those situations are interesting, but I think to go back to the main crux of your question, I don't know if it's necessarily a difficulty in finding interested parties. I just think it's going to be a difficulty of finding like a valuation and agreeing on a price that people are going to want to pay. I don't know if this is the market to do it at the moment. Marstar comes in with a hot question. Who do you think is the first player to get benched? My guess is it's someone on LAG, or it's going to be someone on London. It's going to be after a major one. I would be mega shocked if someone gets benched before the first event, like in these first 2 weeks. It's going to be someone that before New Year's is going to be rotated to a sub spot. I think those 2 teams are probably the likeliest, because if I had to pick 2 teams to probably not get out of groups at major one, I'm probably picking both of those teams. Keeping in mind, guys, by the way, there are 12 CDL teams. Only 8 teams are going to make it to the weekend at major one. So at least 4 teams are going to get eliminated in group stage at major one. And last question from Hose with an interesting avatar. Would a drop in CDL viewership force Activision to enforce more competitive features in future titles, or would it just be the end of the CDL? So a couple of things here. One is, it would take a multi-year drop in CDL viewership or an absolute crater for them to do something dramatic about it. You got to keep in mind that esports is still sort of a marketing exercise for publishers. It's not like a very self-sufficient ecosystem yet with, you know, lucrative revenue streams. And also, it's not the biggest player base when we talk about Call of Duty games. So like enforcing more competitive features, like I don't know if a drop in viewership is necessarily a driver on that. It's more of like the politics internally at Activision trying to turn the wheels to improve the tools available to CDL and their player base. Do I think the CDL will ever end though? No, because I think Activision is always going to embrace esports again as a marketing exercise. It's a drop in the bucket for them. The annual budget of like CDL is a drop in the bucket compared to what they spend annually to promote like a Call of Duty game. I mean, that marketing budget for a Call of Duty game's got to be like 9 figures maybe. So the CDL budget is definitely less than that. That includes prize money. So I don't think the CDL is ever going to end. Because I see, you know, maybe a restructure of how they manage their esports division. I see them sort of taking everything totally externally and letting like someone else run it. Obviously, I could see that. I just don't think like they're just going to hard cut off esports, at least at this moment. And that is the video, guys. Some good questions from all of the folks on Twitter. I'll probably do another one of these in a few weeks, probably prior to Major 1. So as always, guys, like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more content. The CDL starts today, so I'm super excited. We'll be getting some reaction content for you over the next couple of days. As always, guys, we'll see you on the next video.